Alright, YouTube, what is up? So, today's date is September the 20th. Tuesday, September 20th. I point that out because I just made a video a couple days ago. Normally, I don't make more than one video a week, but something neat happened today that I felt like warranted a response from me. So, Gibson has announced the custom shop limited edition, Murphy aged, all that, all the Gibson buzzwords, right? The Kirk Hammett Greeny signature, right? So if anyone doesn't know the story of Greeny, Greeny is a 1959 Gibson Les Paul that was owned by Peter Green, who started Fleetwood Mac. He used the guitar on the first couple Fleetwood Mac albums. He also took Eric Clapton's place in John Mayall's Blues Breakers after Clapton left, and he played this Les Paul. And it was his main guitar in the early part of his career. And then he sold the guitar to Gary Moore. And Gary Moore was in Thin Lizzy, and he had a really prolific solo career, tons of albums. And Gary had the guitar for about 30 years or something. He had the guitar for a long time. And then he sold it, and then Gary passed away, and then, so it kind of went around the circuit of collectors and guitar brokers and that kind of scene, and then it ultimately landed in Kirk Hammett from Metallica's hands. So Kirk owns it now. And Gibson's done a collector's choice number one is Greeny, for people that don't know that. So if you've been wanting one, collector's choice number one is Greeny, but they're super expensive, like something like $30,000 on the used market or something like that, right? So Gibson has announced this new version of it, and they've got the guitar now. Cesar and Kurt are real close. Like if you follow their social medias, you see them hanging out all the time and stuff. So Gibson has really analyzed the guitar. They've probably taken x-rays of it and all this kind of stuff and everything. And so these new limited edition reissues should be like super top shelf. And they look like they are. The case candy is really cool too. You get some photos of Kurt. You get a nice leather strap and a thing of like Kurt's signature guitar picks. And the guitar case was the cool thing. If I can, I'll try to find some photos and like edit them in here. But my video editing skills aren't the best, so if that doesn't happen, don't be mad. But I'll try to put some photos in here so that you can see them. But the guitar, the case that the guitar comes in has Peter Green. It says Green, Moore, Hammett, which I thought was a really cool kind of homage to them. Because the guitar has such a prestige to it and such a lineage, and not just the people that have owned it, but just the people that have played it. Joe Bonamassa has played it. Jimi Hendrix has played it. Jeff Beck has played it. There's a lot of really high-profile people have played that guitar. Eric Clapton's played it. It's such a legendary guitar. I would argue that it's probably the most legendary Les Paul of all time, maybe outside of like Clapton's Beano Les Paul. And the only reason I would say the Beano Les Paul is more like legendary is because it doesn't exist. No one knows where it is. No one's seen it in like 50 or 60 years or something like that, right? Like it got stolen from Clapton in the late 60s, early 70s, and no one's seen it since then. So, it's just mythical at this point. But as far as like real tangible guitars go that you can observe, in the real world, Greeny is like the one, right? So Les Paul players, Les Paul aficionados, collectors, enthusiasts, whatever you want to call us, right? We kind of hold this guitar to like a very mythical status. So I say all that to get around to the price tag of this guitar. So allegedly, what I've heard in kind of the circles that I'm in is that this guitar is going to retail for like $50,000 or something like that. So this video is going to be kind of like a twofold thing. It's going to be kind of talking about this, but also just in general, because it's a question that gets brought up all the time. That I see people online complaining about, talking about, and it kind of comes from a place of, I hate to sound kind of like harsh here, but it kind of comes from a place of ignorance and just not really knowing a lot about Gibson, the brand, all that kind of stuff, right? So the conversation that gets brought up all the time is like, are Gibson guitars too expensive? And it's a really easy kind of reaction to just be like, yes, they are. Because I mean, you look at something like this, Greeny Reissue, $50,000. You're like, who in the world is going to buy this, right? Well, I can tell you exactly who's going to buy it, because I know who's going to buy it. And this guitar will sell out. Like, they won't have any issues with this. But it's kind of a question that just applies generally to Gibsons, because people say, man, a regular Gibson Les Paul standard is like $2,800, you know. Production line guitar. You know, not a custom shop guitar, nothing special about it, just a production line Gibson Les Paul standard is like $2,800. So, you know, a custom shop R9 is like $6,000. And people are like, man, you know, other companies' custom shop guitars cost like half that, right? Like, so what I kind of want to do here is talk about why I don't think Gibsons are overpriced for what they are, and kind of address that take, because it's kind of a hot take, because a lot of people think they are, and I understand why, but let me break it down and kind of explain why I don't think they are. So, first off, you have to take into account inflation and just how money has been devalued over the years, right? So, in 1959, a Gibson Les Paul standard was like $250 or something like that, right? And if you account for inflation, that's not a whole lot off from where they are now. They're about the same price. So they've always been this expensive. They were this expensive back in the 50s. It's not just like some new thing that's come around, right? They've always been that price. The other thing that I kind of want to get into, and I'll grab one of them here, is the way Les Pauls are made makes them more expensive to produce. Like, take this Strat. Where's my arm? There we go. Take this Strat. Right? The neck is just bolted on with screws. The guitar is totally flat. The body is just like a slab of wood. All the electronics are just mounted to a pick guard. There's nothing fancy about the guitar at all, right? So, Les Pauls are made completely different. The bodies are super thick. You've got all this binding, which takes time. Someone has to do this, right? They have maple caps on them, so that's a piece of maple glued on top of the piece of mahogany. They've got set necks, so the neck pocket has to be cut a lot more accurately than that, and it has to be glued in, and the necks are angled. They're not flat. So that pitch has to be measured and calculated and done properly. The inlays in the neck, the binding on the neck, you know, if you have a custom, like the inlay on the headstock, the binding on the headstock, the guitars are just, the carved top, like the top of this guitar is not flat, it has an arch to it. So, the construction of a guitar like this is a lot more difficult than the construction of a guitar like a Stratocaster or a Telecaster. So that's why, that's one thing that adds into why they cost so much. And that directly comes from Gibson themselves in the 50s. Like, when Leo Fender came out with the Telecaster, he was marketing the Telecaster toward like your average everyday person. The Telecaster was just a slab of wood with a neck bolted to it. Nothing fancy about it. And so Gibson said, well, we're going to make a guitar that directly competes with that by being fancier, more expensive, more high-end, and it's going to be marketed toward a different audience. Like, it's going to be marketed toward a, you know, more for lack of a better phrase, just for a richer audience, like it is. And so the original Les Pauls were painted gold. They had sparkly gold tops on them. And that was specifically to attract like a more higher end clientele. So the guitars were made, you got to think about like what was going on at the time musically, right? Like Les himself, the guy, Les Paul, was a really like kind of virtuoso, like jazz and like I don't even know what you'd call the style of music he plays. Like, it's just really out there for its time, right? But he was really popular, and he was a phenomenal guitar player and very virtuosic guitar player. So, they were marketing the guitar to, like, I said this to one of my friends the other day, and he laughed. Like, so for lack of a better phrase, like bougie New York jazz musicians. Like, that's who they were marketing the guitar toward. They weren't marketing it toward people that were going to buy Telecasters. Like, they just weren't. That wasn't the original intention of the guitar. And in my opinion, to this day, it still isn't. Now, does that mean like Gibson doesn't want everybody to buy a guitar? No, they do. That's why they have such a different range of guitars. Like, that's why they have juniors and specials and studios and tributes, right? They have guitars at much lower price points than a Les Paul Custom. They have guitars at much lower price points than that, leading, kind of stepping all the way up to something like this, right? So, this is a standard production line guitar. Like, it's not, a limited thing. Like, you can get a Les Paul Custom right now. Like, you don't have to buy this crazy, like, reissue thing that costs insane amounts of money. Like, you don't have to buy that. Like, this is a standard production guitar. Now, okay, sure, list price on a brand new Les Paul Custom is $5,000. On a white one specifically, it's like $5,700 or $5,800. For some reason, the white is more. Don't know why. It just is. But you have to just understand, like, the guitar is more difficult to make, takes longer, takes a more skilled person to build a guitar like this than it does a guitar you just bolt together, right? So you have to pay that person more money. So now we're going to get into that. I don't want to make it like political or anything, but people always complain about companies not paying people enough money. People don't make a livable wage, okay? Well, people at Gibson do. They make pretty good money. I think starting pay at Gibson is like around $20 an hour, and then it just goes up from there, right? So if you're going to pay your employees $20+ an hour in the U.S., in America, the guitars are going to be more expensive, right? Like, people that work in China or Indonesia that are making $300, $400 guitars, they're not getting paid $20 an hour, right? They probably don't have health insurance and benefits and 401ks and vacation time and that kind of stuff either. So if you're gonna, if you're gonna scream about companies not paying people enough money, and then you're gonna chastise companies for charging like a set amount of money for their product so they can then in turn pay their employees an actual livable wage, you're kind of being hypocritical. If you support American labor and livable wages, the direct result of that is going to be the guitars are going to cost a little more. That's why an American Strat costs $1,700. A Mexican Strat costs $850. Now, I don't know if you've ever looked on a map how far away the two Fender plants are, the one in Mexico and the one in California. They're not that far away from each other. Okay? An American Strat and a Mexican Strat are basically the same guitar. They're not even made that far away from one another. But one of them is twice the price of the other one. That's because you're paying for American labor, not Mexican labor. right? That's just the facts. That's just the facts of it, right? The reason why companies outsource production, and this stems across all businesses. This isn't just specific to guitars, right? Companies that outsource production do it because it's cheaper. If you're going to pay people in America to produce stuff, you have to pay them more money, you have to give them more benefits. That's just the reality of it. So people think, oh, well, I'm paying $2,000, $3,000 for a guitar. It should be, twice as good as a $900 guitar. Well, not necessarily. You're not necessarily paying for quality. And I know that's such a mind-blowing thing to people, but you're not necessarily paying for quality. You're paying for production cost. Quality is a byproduct of that, right? If you have well-trained luthiers, well-trained techs, they should, by default, build a good guitar. It doesn't matter if they live in China or Mexico or Indonesia or the United States. I've played lots of Indonesian guitars and Japanese guitars and Chinese guitars that are phenomenal instruments, that are awesome quality, all right? I've played a lot of U.S.-made guitars that I didn't really care for. I've played a lot of U.S.-made guitars that were phenomenal guitars. I played a lot of Chinese and Indonesian guitars, too, that I didn't like either. So, bad quality doesn't discriminate. You can have bad cheap guitars and bad expensive guitars. You can have good cheap guitars and good expensive guitars. The price of those instruments has very little to do with the quality of them. It has to do with the production cost, the cost of the materials, and the cost of the labor. So if you're using more expensive materials in a higher end guitar, you're going to have more expensive materials, right? So if you're using more expensive materials and you're using more expensive labor, the guitar is going to cost more money. I mean, that's just, I don't know why that's such a difficult thing to understand. Right, just because you're paying $3,000 for something doesn't mean that it's going to be 3 times as good as a guitar that costs $1,000. It might not be any better, right? And so the argument then is, well, why wouldn't I just buy a $1,000 guitar? Well, then buy one. But by all means, go buy one. But don't get angry. Or, get on the internet and get in some chat room or some forum or whatever it might be and start ranting about expensive guitars. Don't do that, because you're probably the same person that gets in comment sections and screams about people not getting paid enough money and companies not paying their employees enough money. And then you're going to turn around and scream about watches or guitars or electronics or whatever else it might be costing so much. And it's like, well, if you want those people to make more money, then those companies are going to charge more money for their products. And that doesn't necessarily equate to you getting a better product. It just doesn't. So, I like Gibson Les Pauls. Okay? Those are the guitars I like. I don't care that they cost $3,000. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to buy them anyway. Okay? I don't have a Ferrari. I don't have a Bugatti. I don't have a BMW or a Mercedes, right? Because I don't care about those things. I don't care that a Ferrari costs however many hundreds of thousands of dollars it costs. I don't care. Even if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't care, right? I drive an 8-year-old Chevrolet Silverado, and I paid $25,000 for it. And when I went to the dealership to buy the truck, the guy tried to sell me a brand new $80,000 GMC Apex. And I didn't care, because that's not my thing. That's not what I'm into. I'm just like, I just needed a truck. I didn't need an $80,000 truck. I didn't need it. Even if I would have had the money, I wouldn't have bought it. I still would have bought the truck I bought, right? So that brings me back to, you're just not Gibson's target demographic. You're not. They're not marketing toward you. you're not their demographic. They don't care what you think because you're not buying their stuff anyway. So that's all there is to it. I mean, that's just the brass tacks of it. Like, if you buy Gibson stuff and you are a Gibson consumer of their products, then yes, they care about your opinion. And most of the people I know that own multiple Gibsons, that are Gibson people, none of them complain about the price. They don't care. It doesn't bother them because they understand that they're supporting American labor. They're supporting a company paying their employees a livable wage, and they're getting the product that they want to get. Now, do I think Gibson's perfect? Do I think they're infallible? No. They make mistakes. You know, they have guitars with issues just like any company does, right? But that doesn't mean that every guitar they make is crap. That doesn't mean that they're all severely overpriced or anything like that. It's not what any of that means. If you don't like Gibson guitars, that's fine. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to. You're not obligated to like their product. You're just not. You can play anything you want. I played Ibanez's and ESPs for years. My like main band that I used to be in that toured all the time and stuff, I used Ibanez's and ESPs all the time, and I think they make great guitars. But I've always liked Gibsons. I've always wanted to own a guitar like this. So, you know, through, I don't know, you know, growing up and getting older and having better income, I was able to get guitars like this. You know, if that doesn't matter to you, that's fine. Like I said before, like Rolexes and Bugattis don't matter to me. So if I was a millionaire, I still wouldn't buy those things. I would buy this $50,000 Kirk Hammett Les Paul that's about to come out. That's what I would buy because that's what matters to me. That's what I care about. I don't care about the other stuff, right? But those companies don't care that I don't care because there's plenty of other people that do care about the products they make and are going to spend their money on that product. So I guess the whole point of this video, like, is to just try to have some perspective on it. Try to kind of, you know, I know it's such a, like, you have almost like a visceral gut reaction when you see a $50,000 guitar, right? That's not a vintage guitar. That's not like this is a brand new guitar that they're just making and releasing, and they're charging $50,000 for it. Like, you know, I'm not gonna lie, like that's pretty bold. Like, kudos to them because they think they can get that much money for it, and they will. I will guarantee it that they will sell those guitars for that price. So, just try to have some perspective of it. Just understand that the market kind of dictates who sees what and who gets marketed what. Like, if you're not the kind of person that's going to buy a $10,000 guitar or a $50,000 guitar, then it's not for you, right? If you're comfortable and satisfied with buying $500 guitars, $1,000 guitars, $2,000 guitars, whatever it might be, there's dozens of companies and different models and makes of guitars that exist in those price brackets that are phenomenal instruments. You can get a $500 guitar that's awesome. You can get a $1,500 guitar that's awesome. You can get a $5,000 guitar that's awesome, right? Like, the range is there. It's like people act like they see like a $20,000 guitar and they act like that's the only guitar that's available in the world. Like, how dare they? Like, I can't afford that. How dare they? Well, it's not for you, man. Like, you know, I'm not rich. I'm not loaded. Like, I don't have tons of money. Like, I prioritize the things in my life that matter to me. And that's why I have this. And not a Corvette or something. Like, it's just how it is. So, the next time you feel like jumping into a comment section and just, like, exploding because of, you know, you see a guitar that's expensive, like, take a step back and think about it. Like, don't make yourself look stupid. Just realize that there's a reason why that guitar is expensive, right? Labor, production cost, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, thanks for tuning into the video. Sorry if it got a little ranty. It's just one of those things that I've seen a lot of today because of this particular guitar release, you know, and just Gibson in general. People just like to, anytime Gibson does anything, people just jump on it, you know. So I figured I'd make kind of like a reaction video to it, and kind of give my 2 cents on it for what that's worth. But thanks for tuning in to the video. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. You know, hit the like button. Leave me a comment. You know, let's argue about Gibsons in the comment section because it's like my favorite thing in the world to do. So, thank you guys, and I'll be back next week.